Well, good evening, my friends, and welcome to this virtual event featuring works from the incredible collection and gift of Ron and Monique Ali. I'm Meredith Holbrook, President of the Board of Trustees, and I'm so happy to see each and every one of you tonight. These works are the basis of the fantastic exhibition, The Shape of Abstraction, and I'm holding the catalog, which you all should have received in advance of tonight. And you can try to follow along with the curators if you have it in front of you. I'm honored to welcome members of the Ali family who are attending, including Monique McRipley Ali, Ron's wife, Joyce Wilkes Love, Ron's sister, and Reggie Ali, Ron's brother. Additionally, we have many other family members and guests of the Ali family with us. I'd be so happy if you all would raise your hand so we know who you are. Thank you. We're so honored to have all of you here, and we're so thrilled that you could join us tonight. I encourage you to interject with any thoughts or anecdotes as curators speak on Ron, his years as a collector, and the exhibition. We titled this evening's program, Cocktails with Curators, and I do hope that you all are enjoying a glass of your favorite libation as we not only hear from the curatorial staff, but we also get a chance to see each other's faces, although remotely through Zoom. I will share for those of you that are basketball fans as well as wine enthusiasts, I splurged this evening on a fine Napa Cabernet from Domaine Curry. This is the winery owned by the Golden State Warriors point guard, Steph Curry's wife and sister, and it's very delicious. I asked the staff to arrange this program for us because I, like so many of you, miss all of the events at the museum that we are accustomed to attending. Exhibition openings, tours, lectures, and gallery talks, all of which are enjoyable and rewarding, not only for their educational content, but for the company and the fellowship of sharing the experience together. Thank you all again for being here. It's wonderful to see you this evening, and I raise a glass across the internet to all of you, your continued health, looking ahead to a day when it's safe and possible that we can all be together again. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
The museum is making great strides in delivering programs to us remotely. Indeed, there is another virtual program going on this evening on Currents 118 and Elias Sime, Ethiopian artist, and both our events and both this event and the Sime program will be recorded for those of us who are not able to attend one or other in real time. If you would like to access either recording, please reach out to John Remilius. Before we begin, I would like to let you know how this evening's program will work. In a minute or two, I will ask curator Nicole Bridges, who will be with us from the PDP study room, to speak on Ron and Monique Ali as collectors. After Nicole, curators Simon Kelly and Elizabeth Wyckoff will speak from the galleries where The Shape of Abstraction is currently on display. We will not only see Simon and Elizabeth, who will be socially distanced, but we will have a view from a camera moving around inside the galleries, showing us the works on the wall as Simon and Elizabeth speak about them. And then Brent will have some concluding remarks about the Alis and the importance of them and their collection to the St. Louis Art Museum. We will end this virtual program with a question and answer period. During the curator's comments, we ask that you mute your device, but you're welcome to unmute with questions for the curators at any point throughout the program. You need not wait for the question and answer period. So at this point, I will turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Meredith. Good evening. My name is Nicole Bridges. I'm the Associate Curator in charge of the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and the acting Morton D. May Curator here at the museum. I grew acquainted with Ron and Monique Ali when I was a curator at the Newark Museum, where Ron was a longtime and beloved trustee. Ron and Monique welcomed me warmly in Newark and introduced me to their collection. Ron and I commiserated about having lived in Brooklyn during formative periods of our lives. Ron lived in the Fort Greene area. And Ron, Monique, and I discovered that we all share a love for jazz and jazz vocals. After I arrived in St. Louis, it was my honor to introduce the Ollies and their collection to my colleagues here at the St. Louis Art Museum. Along with so many whose lives Ron touched through his passion for art and his warm, generous spirit, I am heartbroken over Ron's passing just a few months ago. We are fortunate to have with us today Ron's family, including lots of Ron's family, including his wife Monique, his sister Joyce, and his brother Reggie. Now, this is a cocktail event, and with cocktails, there must be music, especially jazz, which Ron loved and to which he connected his love for abstraction and art. So I'm going to cue some music and continue my remarks when the instrumentals resume. Now, while John Coltrane and Johnny Hartman introduce themselves, please pour a drink and make a toast to Ron.
If I should write a book for you that brought me fame and fortune too, that book would be like my heart and me, dedicated to you.
There's a saying in the Ollie family that Ron could sing before he could speak. Ron sang opera, spirituals, and jazz standards. He was known to spontaneously sprinkle lyrics, singing into conversation, which he did here at both his lecture and public conversation with Brent last year on stage. I'm joining you from the print study room, where I'm lucky to have as my backdrop 2 works from the Ollie collection, a Stanley Whitney drawing, Untitled, from 1998, and Al Loving's Mercer Street series number 6 from 1986. I like to consider each work in the Ollie collection as members of Ron and Monique's family. Indeed, family really is so foundational to Ron and Monique's collecting. Oops, sorry, I keep doing that. Collecting art brought Ron and Monique together. Ron and Monique were introduced to each other at the 2003 edition of the National Black Fine Arts Show at New York City's Puck Building. Both Ron and Monique come from large, loving, extended families who many of us at the museum were fortunate to grow acquainted with through their engagement with the gift and exhibition processes. These families are so wonderful. I think many of us, well, okay, maybe me, are quietly wishing that we were Ollies or Book Ripleys ourselves. Have been so warm and loving through this whole process. Of course, this approach to family, or a deep family feeling so threaded through the collection, is in the very name of the gift, the Thelma and Bert Ollie Memorial Collection, named in honor of Ron's parents. It's Thelma and Bert who Ron credited for fostering his love of art and music by bringing him to the St. Louis Art Museum and to the Muni as a child. Ron's approach to forming his collection was also rooted. I have a couple more photos here to share as well. There's baby Ron in his parents' arms, and a great photo of the 4 Ollie siblings together with their parents. Ron's approach to forming his collection was also rooted in establishing close relationships with the artists whose work he collected. These artists became another kind of family for Ron, A few years ago, when I joined Ron for lunch at the Chelsea Square restaurant, he was full of stories and nostalgia for his many gatherings there with these artists over the years. My colleagues Elizabeth Wyckoff and Simon Kelly will now guide us on a more direct exploration of the art and artists in Shape of Abstraction, selections from the Ollie collection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. I want to say, actually, for your benefit, that Reggie Ollie has accepted me as an honorary family member, so I'm pretty sure that you could also have such an honor. Welcome, everyone, to the Shape of Abstraction, the exhibition that celebrates the gift of the Thelma and Bert Ollie Memorial Collection of 81 artworks by Black artists. The exhibition was beautifully co-curated by two former colleagues, Mellon Fellow Gretchen Wagner and Bearden Fellow Alexis Assam, and is itself exhibit number 1 about the impact this gift has had on St. Louis. Simon and I co-edited the catalog, which you all have a copy of. It includes contributions by yet another Bearden Fellow, Rahima Barber, now Chief Curator at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, and several other museum colleagues. Not to forget the resounding poem by St. Louis's own Quincy Troup, the renowned poet, Miles Davis biographer, and collector of Black abstract art. Ron commissioned the poem on the occasion of this gift, and Quincy generously allowed us to borrow the title of his poem, The Shape of Abstraction, for the exhibition and its catalog. I'm happy that Nicole played music a moment ago. It was central to Ron's life, as it was to the artists whose work he collected. For example, behind me is Sam Middleton's 1990 collage, which references not only jazz, but also his adapted home of the Netherlands, where he moved in 1961, and Dutch art history. The primary colors of Piet Mondrian and De Stijl are clearly evident. Middleton actually grew up in Harlem, close to the Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom, where he went every day after school to watch the likes of Ella Fitzgerald, Artie Shaw, and Billie Holiday at their rehearsals. He called music his juice from home, and his work an improvised solo. So this evening, Simon and I want to speak to the impact of the Ollie collection that it's had on the museum from our points of view. And we also want to celebrate Ron Ollie, who was the extraordinary force behind both the collection and the gift to the St. Louis Art Museum. First, a word about Ron, who I first met when he and Monique picked me up at the Newark train station on a fall Sunday morning in 2015. I was going to see their collection for the first time. Ron had just an outsized passion for abstract art with roots in his childhood, but that passion really exploded when he moved to New York and discovered that there were great Black abstractionists on par with Rothko and de Kooning. He was really unique in his focus on Black abstraction, and his collection is a powerful testament to the dedication of both the artists who kept working, often with little art world recognition, and to Ron, whose recognition of them has come full circle in the museum where he first learned what art was. It's hard to believe that it was 1 year ago today, or this last week, that we were all together celebrating the Ollie collection and the opening of the Shape of Abstraction. It was such a joy for me to see Ron and Monique together, enjoying their vision for the collection come to fruition. Which is to say, the art on the walls around me is really just part of the story. It's at the center of a brilliant spiraling vortex that Ron generated. He was a tireless and irresistible promoter of the artists whose works he collected. And he made sure that everyone he met learned to appreciate it like he did. He liked to say that he loved the art. He loved having it around him, hanging it in his home. But what made everything come together for him were his relationships with the artists. Simon and I will highlight some of those relationships today. The Ollie gift also includes a library, an archive of research materials, a program endowment which will ensure educational programs at the museum on the subject of Ron and Monique's passions into the future, and from Joyce and Reggie, the Ollie Family Resource Cart, which will be filled with a diverse selection of art books for young people, pre-K through teens, and we will be available for both in-person and virtual programs. Ron drew both Simon and I and many, many others here at SLAM into his vortex. For me, that meant regular and jovial phone calls and emails, checking in on the process of the gift, the exhibition, and the catalog, as well as frequently forwarded emails announcing new shows and lectures by his artists, or articles in the art press that were increasingly proving that his passion was at last gaining broad recognition. The one thing I hope everyone signs off with this evening is the knowledge of what an incredibly warm and generous, gregarious and dedicated individual Ron was. This gift, which he and Monique donated in honor of his parents, places SLAM firmly on the cutting edge of the field of abstract art by Black artists. It's the ultimate act of gratitude to his hometown, where he learned to appreciate art, from childhood trips to the Muni to college dates at the museum. So I too want to acknowledge the presence of Ron's beloved wife, Monique, and his two siblings, Joyce and Reggie, and all of the other family members. Ron's generosity and community spirit, as you've heard before, has extended to his inclusion of the entire family in the building of the collection, and especially in the gift, which, to Ron's credit, was truly a family affair. So I will pause a moment if anyone has any questions now, and then Simon and I will start focusing on the art. Okay, well, don't hesitate to interject. So we'll take you through the galleries with Ken Zinkel expertly operating the camera as our eyes, starting with this dry pigment drawing by Ed Clark, who passed away late last year. Clark was known for his shaped paintings and for painting with a push broom. Even in his works on paper, he was an iconoclast. And in this dry pigment drawing inspired by travels in Brazil, he managed to embed the pigment, just powder, into and onto the paper without a binder, occasionally adding a flourish of liquid additions for accent. Clark spent a significant part of his career in France after serving there in World War II. He studied at the legendary school of the Grande Chaumière. He was friends also with the American abstract expressionist painter Joan Mitchell, and often stayed with her in his studio near Paris. Clark was one of the artists who had huge impact on Ron. He told him what to see when he went to Europe, and crucially, he helped Ron train his eye. Ron recalled fondly that Ed would invite him to his studio and ask Ron what he thought of his new work, giving him the opportunity to look and see through an artist's eyes. He also introduced Ron to the work of his peers. He took him to the studios of Frank Bowling and Stanley Whitney, both of which we'll look at next with Simon. First, the Stanley Whitney painting.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for setting the scene for Ron and Monique's wonderful collecting history. And I'd just like to add to what Nicole and Elizabeth have said, and just say, you know, how deeply saddened, you know, I've been by Ron's passing. I always was inspired by and learned from, you know, my conversations with Ron. It's wonderful that we have here Monique and Ron's other close family members. And I hope that we can, you know, give some insight into Ron's collection, Ron and Monique's collection, and really his foresight in his collecting. So we're going to start with this painting by Stanley Whitney, a major work with Stanley Whitney's trademark method of blocks of color stacked on top of one another. Color is this artist's primary interest, and a love of color really is a defining feature of the collection that Ron and Monique developed. It's interesting, actually, this composition is informed by stacks of stone on pyramids in Egypt that Stanley Whitney had seen on a visit to Egypt in 1994, but of course he transforms them with his interest in color. And, you know, Elizabeth was talking about her sort of personal background with Ron and Monique. I remember when I visited Ron and Monique for the first time, this work was hanging in their living room, and it really stood out for me in terms of its scale and its presence. And we ended up, for those of you who are actually looking at the catalog at the moment, you'll see that we ended up using this painting as a cover for the catalog for the exhibition. One other thing I should say about this work, so we've shown this painting in the East Building of the museum, and we will plan to include this work and others in permanent collection installations in the future. So I think it's important to stress that work from this collection will continue to be on view after this exhibition. Ken, maybe you move on now to the Frank Bowling painting. So I'm happy to show this painting because he's a British artist. So it's the artists in Ron's collection are largely African-American. Frank Bowling is an artist who was actually born in Guyana, but he is British. He spends much of his time in London. And like so many artists in this show, he's now enjoying long overdue recognition. And he had a major show actually at Tate Modern a couple of years ago. This work has a great evocative title. It's called Fishes, Wishes, and Star Apple Blue. And this picture is a memory of Bowling's upbringing in Guyana in the Caribbean. And I think it really evokes the colors of the Caribbean, the light, the water, and the indigo blue tropical fruit, the star apple. A lot of these artists that Ron collected used fascinating processes. And in this case, you'll see that to create this sense of luminosity, Bowling added metallic pigments to his paint and used thick gel, which he pushed around with a palette knife. And I think you can see that there with the ridges in the paint. Ron has so many great anecdotes, but he told us that when he bought this work, Frank Bowling told him not to pay for it directly, but rather pay his studio rent. So Ron said that he paid Frank Bowling's studio rent over 2 summers. So Ken, maybe move on to the James Little painting, please. So this is an important work by James Little that you may recognize. We've used it a lot in the promotion for the show. It's been on the cover of the Museum magazine. I think it's one of Brent's favorite paintings in the show. So Ron and James were really good friends, and Ron actually commissioned this painting from the artist. And like, as I've mentioned with the Bowling, like so many of the works in Ron and Monique's collection, this has a very complex process. James Little created his own special mix of oil and wax. And when I went through the galleries with James, he told me that he built up his surface with 20 layers of paint to get this kind of dense coloristic effect. And you'll see that the composition has a strong sense of geometry as Little moves from the diagonals on the left of the composition, which you can see here, towards the verticals on the right. And he also, if you look carefully, he subtly shifts the shades of his green. So now I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about the watercolor by James Little alongside.
So this is one of a number of examples. You see the Stanley Whitney drawing behind Nicole, which is a work on paper next to a painting by one artist. With James Little, again, we have a drawing. It's not the drawing for the painting, and this drawing is actually kind of paradoxically it's watercolor on paper, but it's almost as complex as the technique for his paintings as well. So there's a lot of that where you have multiple works by different artists in the collection. I want to turn just the corner, right around the corner from the Little is a work by Nanette Carter. And this work is also a kind of complex work of oil on a translucent sheet of mylar, a technique that she's been perfecting for some 20 years. And there's actually, the oil is on both sides of the mylar. Nanette is also one of several artists, including Ed Clark, Herb Gentry, and Al Loving, among others, who would get together with Ron, as Nicole mentioned, at the Chelsea Square restaurant. And Ron liked to call this his Cedar Bar, or their Cedar Bar, referring to the Greenwich Village hangout of the abstract expressionists. And I was going to point you to the photograph that Nicole saw for that. So another one of, a kind of demonstration of this network of artists that Ron kind of brought together. They all knew each other, but they gathered very much around Ron. So I think now we'll move into the next gallery. And Ron had another passion, believe it or not, which was collecting research materials on the artists and art. And this was also included in the Ollie gift. We're just about to zoom in on a case that's in the exhibition, showing a number of the catalogs, sort of small, often rare catalogs. When Ron started collecting, the body of literature on Black abstraction was pretty minimal. It's beginning to grow now, but he really made an effort since starting before 2000, but really starting in 2000, he started to look in a very dedicated way for more and more literature. And that has come as part of the gift to the museum. It's in the Richardson Library. So it goes from small publications like the ones in the case to larger books and catalogs, as well as gallery announcements and correspondence with the artists, and also videos. So moving over to a work by Herb Gentry. Again, talking about Ron's kind of introduction into the art world. In his words, Herbert Gentry opened the art world up to me. Ron was introduced to Herb's work by Joan Allen, whose Art Alliance organized studio visits, auctions, and other ways for the art-loving public to enter the realm of collecting. Joan encouraged Ron to meet Herb Gentry, and the rest really is history. He was the first and most dedicated of Ron's art mentors, and the networking lines to many, if not all, of the other artists seem to have run through Herb. Like Ed Clark, Gentry served in Europe during World War II, and he returned to Paris soon afterwards, establishing multiple pied-à-terre in several different countries, in fact. For a while, in the late 1940s, he operated a nightclub and exhibition space called Chez Honey in Paris's Montparnasse, where improvisational jazz, and I imagine other things, were performed. His work treads the line between figuration and abstraction, which is the subject of this section of the exhibition. Ron told Simon and me the story of the great printmaker, Robert Blackburn, who recognized himself in one of Gentry's prints. Herb shrugged it off, saying all his friends entered his work through his subconscious. And then moving on to one of the works by Norman Lewis that's in the exhibition. Lewis is another artist whose work crosses between abstraction and figuration. Lewis was very much a part of the first abstract expressionist generation, even if he's only recently becoming a fundamental part of the story that is told of that generation. This luminous oil on paper is one of several works that are part of the Ollie gift, and they demonstrate that Ron wanted to fill in the prehistory of the artists he was friends with. While the museum acquired a great painting by Lewis in 2007, these are the first works on paper by the artist to enter the collection. And I'm going to pass you back to Simon to talk about a Jack Whitten work.
So Ron's interest in Jack Whitten is really another example of his foresight in his collecting. Jack Whitten is a major artist, sadly died a couple of years ago, but he's attracted increasing attention in recent years. He had a major show at the Met, for example, in 2018. So the work that you can see here is called Self-Portrait. It's from 1993. It's a collage, has a really intriguing process. And as we've been saying, Ron spoke about his fascination with the innovative processes of the various artists in his collection. I think that interest in part was informed by his own training as an engineer. And here the collage was made by splashing watercolor paint onto a white sheet of paper, then cutting the paper into individual squares and reassembling the squares into this new composition. So you can see that in the image that Ken is showing you. And the dark mass in the center actually suggests the presence of a face of Jack Whitten's self-portrait. If any of you know Jack Whitten's paintings, these squares of watercolor are a kind of counterpoint to the tiles or tesserae that he uses in his paintings. From here, we'll move to a work by Al Loving. Again, an important artist with whom Ron built up a good friendship, was a regular visitor to Al Loving's studio. Al Loving was the first African-American artist to have a one-person show at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York. He had that in 1969. The work that you can see here is a later work from 1993, and it shows the artist's interest in spiraling curvilinear forms. Again, it has a complex process, and Elizabeth is going to talk about that.
So this is a fantastic example of Ron bringing people and art and people again together. When this work got into the museum, our conservators recommended that it would benefit from some stabilization. Fortuitously, a young African-American conservator was beginning a fellowship at the museum, and this became one of the projects that she was able to work on from start to finish. Lastarsha McGarity is now at the National Gallery of Art in Washington and was recently highlighted on CBS Sunday Morning, but I digress. First of all, Lastarsha and Raina Chow and I got together to discuss the project, and we wanted to consult Ron about the proposal. First, however, we turned to the Ollie archive in the museum's library to consult the raw documentary footage that Ron had included. In it, we were able to observe Loving working on it in an almost slapdash fashion with large buckets of paint and acrylic medium, moving quickly from one piece of paper to another and slathering each with layer upon layer of color. He would then go back and cut those painted sheets up and paste them together to form what are essentially wall sculptures like this one. The stabilization issue was related to the red plexiglass Loving used to stiffen the piece on the back, which was aging, as you might expect. We ended up talking not only to Ron, but also to Loving's dealer and to his widow, forming a nuanced body of knowledge about how the artist worked and how other works with similar materials were faring. Lastarsha has shared her insights about the project with conservator colleagues, and we expect that it will help others to determine how to preserve other works by Loving in the future.
So now we're moving to a work by Sam Gilliam, one of two important works by Gilliam that are part of the wonderful gift of Ron and Monique. This work, Half Circle Red, is actually one of my own favorites in the collection. Sam Gilliam is really a pioneering figure, largely because of the way in which he jettisoned the stretcher or the wooden support that generally you see on canvases, which support the structure of paintings. Instead, what you see in Sam Gilliam's work and what you see in this work from 1975 is a draped, a folded canvas, which operates not only as a painting, but also as a sculpture. And you can see in the work that Sam Gilliam has stained the canvas, he's splashed paint over it, and then he's cut it into verticals and semicircles and assembled them in this abstract pattern. He's curved and bent the canvas to give the work, as you can see here, three-dimensionality like a sculpture. And this is all very, very meditated. You know, when we put together this installation, you know, we were the ones who were actually installing the work, but this was based, I had like a 45-minute conversation with Sam Gilliam, really to get his directions about the way to install, and that was actually Ron's introduction, I should say. I mean, Ron was wonderful in terms of, you know, encouraging curatorial connections with the artists, you know, with whom he built his own connections. But Sam Gilliam was very precise. You know, the number of inches at the half circle at the top should be to the left of the central axis. And we, you know, followed that closely in terms of the installation. Ron often visited Sam Gilliam's studio in Washington, D.C., which he described, and I think Elizabeth and I mentioned this in the interview in the catalog. He described it as being like a huge, huge space, like a Colosseum. And he talked about how he loved to visit Sam and talk about art, and it often kind of coincided with his own work trips to DC. And I think he really got to know Sam well, and also the the various artists who visited Sam Gilliam's studio. So I think this work is actually a good place to finish because like so many works in the collection, it's kind of testament to the close friendships that Ron developed with the artists that he supported. So are there any questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Monique or any of the family members can tell us if Ron had a favorite painting inside the St. Louis Art Museum.
Hello, everyone. This is Monique. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. And I'm so sorry. I think I'm getting emotional.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. But he would answer the question by saying he loved them all.
Yeah.
As you know, he had very, very close friendships with all of the artists, including Ed Clark, Frank Bowling, Al Loving, Herb Gentry, but they were all they were all his favorites. It was very interesting. You could see at night he would just stare at his pieces one at a time, and they all gave him such delight. You know, he loved looking at all of the pieces, but you know, he even more so loved bringing them to the St. Louis Art Museum. So I tell you, I think having us all come together here, he would have been just so overjoyed to see all of us here enjoying this moment and being able to have an opportunity to go through one more time to see the exhibition. You know, but that's a very tough question because I think he would always answer it by saying he would love them all.
Monique, I remember when Elizabeth and I spoke to him, he mentioned Rodin. He mentioned his interest in Rodin. Did he ever speak to you about that?
You know, I think it was mainly because, you know, his good friend Herb Gentry and Ed Clark would encourage him to study and to stay focused and to always be looking at other artists. And that was one, I think, that really helped shape his vision and his, I would say, depth in looking at different structures, different textures. But it was one, I think we did visit the museum, the Rodin Museum, and we spent almost an entire afternoon, you know, just really looking at all of the pieces and just being able to take it all in.
I can tell he loved color.
Oh, absolutely.
Was your home colorful?
It very much was. And I not only, and it is not only the art, but his clothing. When we would go out somewhere, he would reach into his closet and pick the most colorful sweater, shirt, what have you. But he loved color because it brought a smile to his face, and you know, it was just, I think, represented his spirit and you know, his ability of just being able to enjoy life, really.
Maybe there's a future exhibition in that.
There you go. I love it.
Fashion.
I have a question. Monique, with these all, I mean, 81 pieces is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Did you rotate them through your home, or how did you exhibit them?
Yes. Well, we own close to just under 300 pieces in total. And you can imagine the huge process involved in cataloging them all, creating a database, putting them up into storage. But we did have opportunities that allowed us to rotate them around. In some cases, we would donate a piece, and when that one would leave, we would use that space to put up another piece of art. But that was a part of it. You know, it allowed us to continue to you know, create activity in our home, and create more life into the environment. You know, and I tell you, there have been times that there's some pieces that Ron and I would have to bargain on and negotiate, because there's some pieces he'd want to put up and I didn't always agree with him. And some pieces that he'd want to put up and I had, just vice versa. So, but yeah, we had our specials and our favorites that we would put up on the wall, and I'd say maybe a year or so, every 2 years, we would rotate from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was a big rotation in about 2017, right? When all of the 81 works came.
Absolutely.
Well, if there are no more questions or comments, I know that Brent has some closing remarks. And after Brent, this will bring our fun program to an end. I want to thank you all for being here, especially to all of the Ali family and for making this a family event. It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you, Nicole, Elizabeth, and Simon for making this possible from inside the museum. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for spending the evening with us and for your continued support. Thank you so much. And Brent, I'll let you wrap it up.
Thanks, Meredith, and it's a pleasure to do so. First of all, may I say, Monique, just wonderful to see you, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us this evening for this.
Thank you.
Reggie, and so much of the rest of the family, I remember with such fondness being here in St. Louis, a year and a week ago maybe, and having the incredible honor to interview Ron on stage and to hear about his childhood growing up in St. Louis, the incredible love of his parents and his family for coming to the museum, the amazement of the impact that those kinds of visits in the 1950s had on his entire life. And Ron talking about how this informed, not only his approach to his dorm room at Rolla, Missouri,
Right.
And what hung behind the sofa, right? And the conversations he had, but the notion that, the art museum was a fantastic place to take a date and you guys ought to get a clue. And I just think what an incredibly outsized personality and what an incredibly outsized generosity it took to make this happen, and this incredible homing instinct that St. Louisans all have, even if they've lived their entire life elsewhere, as Ron did, of in the end coming home, and what an incredible honor it is for all of us, the entire museum family, to have been the recipient of this great generosity. Great art museums are formed by great collectors who decide to become great donors. And this art museum is no exception to that. And the texture and the character and the personality of the collection and of the experience one has at the St. Louis Art Museum is the direct result of generations of St. Louisans who decided to take their personal passion and make it a public one. And I cannot tell you how honored we are that Ron chose to not only provide us with incredible works of art that we will take great pleasure in showing from now and forever, but the library and the archival material that support the research on this material, and then turning around and calling me one December and saying, Brent, I want to give you a gift. I said, Ron, you've already done that. Oh, no. We would like to make an endowment so that the programming around African-American abstraction and related programs, including things like literature and poetry and dance and jazz, would continue to be a focus here at the Art Museum. And we can't wait until we're able once again to gather in the auditorium and the galleries and to realize Monique, your and Ron's vision for this incredible gift. So thank you. It's wonderful to add your names to that list of great donors that make this museum the wonderful resource that it is.
And may I also ask, or just mention here, I consider all of you our family. The St. Louis Art Museum, I just want to thank all of you for your love, for your generosity, for your patience, for your just overall warmth. I have my family around here with me. I have my mother, my father, and my sister. I see my brother is joining from Texas. I have my aunt on the line. And of course, I have my fantastic in-laws, Reggie, his wife Rita, and Joyce. So it's been a wonderful family affair, and having family around me including the Slam family, has been a huge blessing. So I just would like to thank all of you, the board of directors, for your continued support and love. Very excited to see all of your faces, and looking forward to seeing you hopefully very soon next year.
All right. That's lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us for this very special program. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.